Was an award-winning podcast by the New York Times all just a hoax? During the rapid rise and fall of Daesh, almost every news outlet wanted to tell that story.
The self-styled caliphate spreading across Syria and Iraq is redrawing the boundaries in the Middle East.
Their forces have moved quickly towards the capital Baghdad, amassing cities, recruits and resources on their way.
We have breaking news that ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is believed to have been killed.
In comes the New York Times podcast, Caliphate, by reporter Rukmini Callimachi. During its 10-episode run, Callimachi went into vivid details about the terror group. Her source, this man.
An Ontario man who claimed he had conducted executions for the so-called Islamic State is facing the rare charge of faking his involvement with a terrorist group.
Abu Huzayfah, now revealed to be Shehroze Chaudhry, claimed to have traveled to Syria to join Daesh. In the podcast, he went into gruesome detail about carrying out executions.
This guy was a drug dealer. I had to stab him in the heart. The blood was it was warm. And it sprayed everywhere. And the guy was crying and screaming.
But after his arrest in Canada on hoax charges, there's been a flurry of questions. And they're being directed at Callimachi and her bosses at the New York Times.
The facts in Chaudhry's story changed as he spoke with different reporters, including Global News, to whom he claimed he served in ISIS but didn't kill anyone.
Callimachi saw rapid success at the time and is a Pulitzer Prize finalist. Her work on Daesh and Al-Qaeda before that gained her fame. But now, her podcast, along with her credibility, is falling apart. And this was no surprise. Questions about her sourcing were being asked before the podcast even aired.
At first, he asked us not to publish. I told him that we couldn't do that. And as we neared publication, he actually began to threaten us and to say, if you publish this, I'm just going to say that I made it up.
So why did this story go out? Well, if you ask her colleague at the Times, Ben Smith, she was delivering what the senior-most leaders of the news organization asked for, with their support. And what were they asking for? Great narratives on the web and streaming services. In a fast-changing media landscape, newspapers have to do more to attract readers. And as the Los Angeles Times puts it, fear sells, and so do the stereotypes. The New York Times began its own review of the reporting shortly after doubts were raised. And apparently, not everyone at the Times was happy with the reliance on the credibility of just a single character. But the reporter appears to have ignored the warning signs.
The Caliphate Podcast, produced by the New York Times, found holes in Huzayfah's story, but said two officials in the U.S. government, as well as an ISIS source, confirmed he was a member of ISIS in Syria.
But the two U.S. sources remained anonymous. And this wasn't the first time Callimachi's reporting raised questions. In 2014, she covered the story of Louay Abu al-Jud, who had allegedly been a Daesh prisoner in Syria. According to her report, Abu al-Jud made eye contact with American hostages, but elements of that story didn't add up. Like the time that Abu al-Jud said he saw the hostages, Daesh no longer controlled the area the prison was said to be in. Some might ask, so she embellished a bit. Which news organizations haven't? Well, this particular podcast had real-world consequences. A former Trump aide, Sebastian Gorka, quoted Callimachi's work, saying he predicted a wave of Daesh attacks would occur in the US. And in Canada, after the podcast aired, the opposition party brought a motion to Parliament. It demanded the government address fears of former Daesh members returning home.
Chaudhry caused a firestorm in Ottawa when politicians believed a terrorist had returned to Canada without arrest.
Canadians deserve more answers from this government.
Absolutely.
Why aren't they doing something about this despicable animal?
Also troubling, plans to repatriate Canadian Daesh fighters and their families from Syria was shelved shortly after Caliphate began airing. Now, if it all turns out to be a hoax, that in no way diminishes the heinous acts of Daesh. But was there a rush by the New York Times to put out a story with a catchy narrative amplified by stereotypes fitting the digital age. Was that more important than telling the truth?